Hello everybody and welcome to North 100. I'm Serge. Joining me as always, I have a Jer.
Hello.
An Alex.
Hey.
And a Ben.
Hello, yes, I am Wheeler.
A reminder that everything we do, including North 100, is brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Let's start off with our opening segment. We always do the best card you're not playing. Up today, we've got Wheeler. Wheeler, what you got for us?
1 mana, red, instant.
Oh, it's
Lightning Bolt.
It's Shock. It's Tarfire. It's
Scred. It's Scred.
Ooh.
So Scred, for those not familiar, is an instant for 1 red that we just covered. Scred deals damage to target creature equal to the number of snow permanents you control.
I can't wait to hear your reasoning
Notably,
behind this
Boreal
one.
Druid is a snow permanent.
Technically, yes.
Because I've seen this card, and I know how it works.
Is it Highlander playable?
Well, he's going to tell us.
Yeah.
I'm measuring this against Flame Slash, so
That's the common, the most analogous card that exists, I guess, at that level, where you really just want cheap removal because the threats are so efficient in our format that, depending on the meta, right now we're going through an awkward phase where Doomblade might be better than something like Flame Slash or Chain Lightning because it can deal with these 5 toughness or more, or 4 toughness or more creatures at instant speed. Guess what also does that for cheaper is Scred. Now it's a little more conditional because you need to have snow permanents.
You're not casting this on 2.
No, but you can.
might.
That's the nice
Still
part
shock.
about it. It's still a shock, right? You lose out the reach of going to the dome or killing a planeswalker. But if you are something like, I don't know, medium red, and you have you can just load up on all these snow basics, then being able to have this instant speed, kill anything on the opposing side of the board, kill any tough to deal with flying block or whatever it may be, that's pretty nice. And moving beyond something like medium red, then you get to one of my favorite decks to adopt this card is Blue Moon. Because Blue Moon plays around...
Really?
You're playing like 20 to 23 basics in Blue Moon.
And you're not playing as many duels because of the nature of Blue Moon.
Right, that deck will actively cut dual lands in blue-red, which you only have like 5. It'll cut them down just because Back to Basics and Blood Moon are so... It's just such a hammer to drop. And being able to be in that deck that is kind of negated, like all of its removal boils down to damage based or counter spells.
Sure. And
so we've seen versions of Blue Moon in the past play cards like Harvest Pyre, which is 1 in a red instant. You additional cost exile X cards from your graveyard.
You're so
Any number.
Look at Alex,
Any
he's
number,
so stoked.
So you just exile any number of cards in your graveyard, and it deals that much damage to a creature. And remember, Blue Moon's a deck that uses its graveyard for cards like Dig Through Time, Logic Knot, Snapcaster.
So you figured that'd be a non-bow.
Yeah, it's one of those awkward things, but they just needed that piece of removal so badly. And there you go. You get it through Scred.
what I will say for this card is it only gets better the longer the game goes on. Because you can just like keep dropping basics, and then eventually you're maybe just gonna like nug something for 8.
Unless your opponent has a Phyrexian Obliterator. Then it gets worse.
But if they have a Phyrexian Negator?
Better.
Ooh, yeah. All right, real talk. Medium red, Blue Moon. Is this playable anywhere else?
I believe so, but I haven't put in enough time on those to give a hard and fast. It's just
where's your loose and medium answer?
I think you could play it in red-green mid-range.
That's where I was going to go next. Like, I could very much see or
of
like a
Boreal Druid?
red-green...
I
Well,
mean,
a red-green
added
ramp
bonus.
deck.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Right.
like, could this slide into Hoof?
No.
I wouldn't play it in Hoof, but if you're playing like a red-green ramp, kind of like a Primeval Titan into Valakut, you're going to play you'll probably play the Dark Depths combo, which snow permanents, Dark Depths, so you can into the north,
you're right,
which
and I hate
finds
that
more
so
snow
much.
lands, and it gives you basically there are
I hate that you're right.
believe there are a couple of archetypes like that, like a red-green ramp deck. You could play it in something even like red black mid-range. Like that sounds kind of awkward because I haven't really played
Well,
that
you also have access to
myself.
Doomblade there, yeah.
I will say, this does have me interested. The only annoying part is getting a hold of a
Enough
sufficient
snow-covered
quantity
lands,
of snow-covered lands,
has-
especially with modern driving up the price of mountains.
That's been probably the number one thing that I've heard from people is like, wow, this is, I want to try out Scred this.
It's a 25-cent card that you need to get
Where do
like
I buy? Yeah.
$50 worth of
do you-
basics.
And also, you have to sacrifice the lands that you prefer to play, like which is
Art-wise?
also a hidden,
Yeah.
hidden cost. Like,
So-
it takes a lot for me to abandon.
You just get sad
Rebecca
every time
Gay.
you play a
So-
land. You're just like,
Honestly, if the snow lands, I really enjoy, as someone that really enjoys old bordered only,
Yeah.
as much as I can, I really enjoy the new bordered, the cold snap
So do I.
snow lands
Yeah.
a lot. And if they didn't look like that, I probably wouldn't have tried this. I would have
really
just
funny.
like thrown it to the side and been like, yeah, it's probably not worth
the
it.
Ice Age Island art is pretty good. Okay, we're getting way off track. Thank you for telling us about Scred,
Yeah,
Ben.
no worries.
Let's introduce today's theme. So today we're going to talk about mulligans. Now, yes, those of you who have been listening to North 100 for a very long time will remember we have, in fact, covered an episode on mulligans before. That would be episode 37, which was a two-person episode, only Jaren and Liam, while Alex and I were out filming Road Quest.
I was gonna say we is a strong word, since only one of us here actually participated in that episode.
But it's back. And this time a little bit different. This time that episode focused on practice hands. Would you mulligan this? Would you keep this, and why? This episode we want to focus more on the mulligan that we use in Highlander right now. The intent behind the creation currently using right now. Is it broken? How can you break it? Should we continue with it? And time permitting, maybe a little bit on the upcoming London Mulligan and potentially if we should adopt it. Let's start off with a definition. Jared, could you start us off with the Sorenson mulligan, which we use, at least in Victoria? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an official rule of our format. It's currently the only non-deck building rule that's different from regular Magic, I think. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but
No, that sounds right.
that's our goal. I'm usually pretty up on these
Yeah,
things.
if you're looking what we mean there compared to any other game of Magic, what is different in Canadian Highlander versus something else? The Sorenson mulligan.
Yeah, so the Sorenson mulligan is you're going to look at your 7 like normal. If you choose to mulligan, you're going to go down to 6 like normal. Then if you keep that hand, you're going to scry. But if you choose to mulligan your first 6, you get a second 6. And then if you keep that hand, you also get to scry. If you choose to mulligan, you go to first 5, so on and so forth. Second 5, first 4, second 4.
Do you get 2 zeros?
No.
I've never tested that.
I'm gonna start a
You've
petition.
never tested 2 zeros? Because you got to the first 0
Well,
and you're like,
yeah, there's no point between 2 zeros because it's not like you get 2 scries.
He was trolling you.
You know what
He
they
was
say,
trying to troll
second
me.
zero's always better.
What's 0 plus 0?
I thought there was legitimately something there. Now I'm sad.
Got him.
Yeah, so we have a famous local saying that second 6 is always better.
Yeah, it's true.
Not, but...
I mean,
if
if it convinces people to mulligan more.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, well, what was the intent behind its creation? Why, and we've had this mulligan for what, 7 or 8 years now. Why did
More.
we deviate away from the mothership longer than that?
2007 or 2008.
12 years?
I was going to guess
believe so.
2004, but
2004? How old is this format? How old am I? Oh, God.
2000. Well, the format that we played in 04, there was such a small group of people, and it was just so entirely different. It's,
Sure.
It's like a prototype. Of
Yeah. OG vintage lander.
all right, we've had the mulligan for a long time.
Sure. Why? Why was this created? Why was this adopted in the first place?
Because there's a greater variance when you're playing with singleton and with more cards. So that's 2 increasing factors to variance in a game that already has a lot of variance. So
Yeah.
the goal was to implement a system that attempted to counteract the added variance by the way we choose to play the game, not eliminate the variance from Magic, but
Yeah.
just sort of like, we're playing 100 card singleton and we're playing 100 cards and singleton. So
What a weird game it would be if you eliminated the variants.
Yeah, that wouldn't be very fun.
You just have a pile of all your cards face up, and you can draw anything you want.
Yeah. So that was the goal with the mulligan initially.
Interesting. And what do we think it's done to the format as a result? And that's sort of like the crux of the episode today. What archetypes does it promote? What strategies does it promote? Does it have a negative impact on anything?
So big picture, I think for a long time it did what it was intended to do, which is to help people see more playable hands.
Yeah.
Whether that means like relevant cards in a certain matchup, or just a reasonable proportion of lands and spells.
Yeah, let you actually play Magic.
Yeah, but as we've gone on, as deck lists have gotten tighter, as people have gained experience in the format,
As the format has matured.
Yeah, it's almost gone really far in the other direction. Like, people are almost certainly playing fewer lands than they should. We've been sort of saying this for like almost the past 5 years, is I think when it really started drumming up. It's like, really, we're in our mid-range decks, we're playing the amount of lands that you'd see in a tempo deck in Legacy, and like,
oh wow.
And like, now someone on this panel,
yeah, we go now to noted Mulligan wrecker and miser Benjamin Wheeler. Ben, you've been accused of destroying the Sorenson Mulligan. Please, what do you have to say for yourself?
So
He plays 29.
I play less than that.
Yeah, Ben before the episode started, it's like, let's talk about your affinity deck, Serge. What do you think about 25 lands? And I'm like,
yeah.
So that might be a little more. It's not even the most extreme. I think the lowest land count I've played with a deck that has come very close to winning an event,
yeah,
or at least being like, oh, this was totally fine. Was when I played 21 land Flying Men.
That's what I was gonna say.
21 land. What?
Yeah, 21 lands. No Mock Sapphire either. I think I may have had Chrome Mox, but no Mock Sapphire. The points, we just couldn't afford it. You're all looking at me like I've just.
Well, keep going.
Anyways,
I mean, I just knew this to be true.
So I have this thought when it comes to the Mulligan, because a lot of the general statement, as Jerry said, is that the Mulligan was initially intended, and for a long time was to encourage people to play more Magic. And then I feel as though by playing certain archetypes and having a land and mana configuration, we almost exclusively for decks below 30 lands, is that instead I get to stop you from playing more Magic. So like, the intent was you get to see more cards, get rid of all the silver bullet cards that you may have to include, but I see this Mulligan and say, oh, I just get to turn 2, turn 3, set up my broken draws or whatever it may be. A lot of this comes from the fact that we get to see so many cards across 7/6, like 7/6 with Scry, 6 with Scry,
yeah,
and even 5 with Scry, 5 with Scry. Like, the amount of cards you see across that, if you're only looking for either a specific card or a specific series of cards, you're going to hit them more often than not. When it comes to something like Storm or Eggs, where technically you're playing Eggs, I'm playing 28 land, 27 if you don't count Teleria West. Storm,
sure, yeah, that's a tutor, not a land.
Yeah,
sure.
So 27 lands in Eggs. I've gone as low as 26 plus Teleria West. Storm, 28, I think I'm on right now.
Yeah.
I believe Robin is on something similar, 28 plus West or 29 plus West.
So just for some context, for people who don't know the significance of those numbers, if you look at a 60-card deck, people often make the analogy of like 20-20-20. So 20 lands, 20 creatures, 20 spells or something.
And that's for an aggressive deck.
Yeah.
That's still low.
And that's 33% of your deck is lands. And we're in a 100-card deck, so you can see that. Ben is suggesting under 1/3. The number is the percentage that's in there, which is very low. A typical control deck in Standard will be like 36 to 38 lands.
Yeah, if you convert...
Not that
much anymore?
Like 28.
Oh, pardon me, yeah.
If you convert some of the decks that... The more notorious decks that I play below the 30 land, you're looking, and you put it to a 60 card shell, you're looking at 16 to 17 lands.
That's what draft decks
And if
play.
you're going to the extreme and his Flying Men deck, it's basically like playing 12 lands in a 60 card deck.
Yeah.
What does Legacy Elves play for lands?
Like
14 to 16? Yeah.
17. It's been a hot minute since I played it.
All right,
But
they
you also
usually-
have Dryad Arbors and
They usually play 8 fetch, 2 Dryad Arbor, 1 or 2 Bayou, 4 Cradle.
a Savannah. They used to
Depends on the
when I
build.
played.
Yeah.
They're off Gaddock Teague now, I think, but they're back on Archon.
Thank
So
God. Yeah. So to get to why, I guess,
Yeah.
I do this.
Well, not only why, but you win with this too.
Yeah.
I know the answer to that question. It's because you're sad.
I think that this whole
well, the thing that's really impressive to me about what Ben's been doing is he's done it across different decks and different archetypes.
Sure.
And he's done this. So he's done it with aggressive decks. He's done it with decks that are like weird mid-rangey decks in the medium style of decks. He's done it with combo decks, and there's a few things he leans on across these that, or like whenever I always try to look at the winning list and like see if anyone's doing anything weird or if they just played a good deck and played well. And when I started looking at Ben's winning lists, I noticed a few trends, because his lists were different than most of the lists that were winning, because he was playing very low land count. And so I was like, all right, what's he doing to compensate for that? So he's playing very high power level cards, which means that he can mulligan more aggressively. And if he keeps a good 5, it's going to beat most people's average 7s. He has high redundancy across some of the decks, which means that he's going to have a lower land count, but almost any hand he has with lands and spells is more likely to be a keepable hand than across most other decks. Especially in the blue decks where he does this, he plays so many cantrips and card selection spells so that he's able to see cards and use his experience and skill to give himself more decisions than his opponent, and his experience with his deck to just give him lines to win games.
So in all, you want to be like Custard and have good consistency.
Yep.
Well, there's
Be like Custard.
Be like Custard.
There's an interesting thing. It's not even like, oh, the degenerate combo decks are too strong. The fact that Ben can do this across multiple different archetypes shows the common denominator, well, other than being Ben, is Mulligan.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. I can't remember the first time I told Ben that he broke our mulligan system, but it was a while ago, and I've just been tanking about it since, and like, yeah, I don't know.
I typically have 2 approaches when I'm building any kind of deck. Now, especially for the past year, that's basically been my exclusive focus. For a long time, I really enjoyed playing just blue control. Like combo's always been my top favorite choice every single week. But for a while, I was playing just Jeskai control and trying different builds of that. That deck will always have a place in my heart. But I really like it when my decks have a nut draw. And I don't feel like Jeskai necessarily has that. And moving away from that kind of deck in the past year and trying to focus more on either the sub 30 land count decks, which, like Jared said, Garbage Platter is the perfect example of this, because on paper it can look like absolute tripe.
It's literally called garbage.
Yeah, but when you go across the 5 mulligans of 7, 6, 6, 5 plus scry, because it has this like spider web of cards of show and tell works with Omniscience, which works with Emrakul, and Emrakul also works with show and tell. And what else does Emrakul work with? Well, sneak attack, and I can show and tell a sneak attack. And what else could I sneak attack in? Oh, Gristlebrand. Well, Gristlebrand's also legendary, so we have Gorios. Like, it's just this soup of everything that gets put in. But all these cards are so punchy. Like, if you could go up to somebody at like a legacy event or a vintage event, and if they say, how'd your round go? And you replied a single word answer with Emrakul, Bristlebrand, Show and Tell. You'll get what they mean immediately, right? And then on the other side with the medium, like medium red, the mid-range shells, the land count is higher, as you're still less than your average because you are a Mox deck or a fast mana deck.
Sure.
But you mulligan very similarly to the combo decks, but you acknowledge that your game plan might go on past turn 4 and turn 5.
Now, well, like going to that, I used to play Big Red, and I love the big decks. And my goal is I'm going to make an unbeatable 7 or 6 hand.
Right.
And you just mull to that, and you're like, all right, I've got a turn 1 Worm Coil. Deal with it. And oftentimes they could, but like that deck felt so hit or miss because it was just like, cool, I've got my ramp, I've got my piece, I've got this amazing start hand, and just mull to that. And I eventually fell off the deck because it was inconsistent.
The advantages of the medium decks is that they have a very strong, fair game plan where they just get to, they still have some 1s, a bunch of 2s, and lots of 3s. So they still just get to be like a reasonable, aggressive, disruptive deck.
Like,
but when they draw the Mana Crypt or Soul Ring, they get to act like the big deck.
playing Thundermaw Hellkite on turn 5, you're still going to be like, oh yikes, this is a big dumb dragon. But if they play it on turn 2 or turn 3, you're like, oh my god, it's this dragon, right? And as I mentioned, as we were talking earlier before we started recording, is that while the medium decks get to play 6 copies of 4 power or more haste creatures, probably even more. Like you get all your dragons and you get Hazarets
And Sarkhan.
Sure.
and
Reality Smasher.
Reality Smasher. You get access to all these cards, and again, as we mentioned, hitting them on turn 3 or turn 5 is still going to be very impactful. And the impact of those cards, it's very comparable to getting out a Wormcoil Engine or a Mere Battle Sphere. And when you have the top end of the big red cards turn 1 or turn 2, aside from stuff like Ugin, which is just, I mean, game over.
Sure.
But when you get them turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, often they will be disrupted similarly, and they'll kill your opponent in a way that it's exactly the same as the dragons. But when those get dealt with, you feel so bad.
Yeah.
Because you've input all your
Everything.
resources.
Your whole 7. Like I would have a turn 1 Worm Coil, and you're like, Swords to Plowshare, and you're just like, whoa. It just feels like getting hit in the kidney. You're like, that was my everything.
So what you're saying, Serge, is hit or miss. I guess they never miss.
Oh my god.
And with the medium decks, they don't have nearly as many dead cards. They're way more threat dense. They're not playing Signets. They're not playing like Basalt Monolith. They're not playing Thran Dynamo.
Feeling very attacked
They're not playing. They're not playing a bunch of cards that just
do nothing.
Functionally by themselves aren't a threat. Don't progress.
The 16
on-board gameplay.
The like 15, 16-ish slots that a big red deck or a heavy ramp strategy would dedicate to signets or rampant growth effects, whatever it may be, you just get to replace those with like Goblin Rabble-Masters and Legion Warboss. Or even on the less powerful side, you just get to replace them with Screds, Flame Slashes, stuff like that. Or even like Heart of Kirin's, Smuggler's Copters, vehicles or cheap cards that are still going to actively try to kill your opponent or stop you from dying, where rocks don't do that.
That's always been the problem I've had with like big mana decks that rely on mana rocks. Is like they're great if you have something to power out through them, and then afterwards they're not very good.
Well, the variance of you get all ramp or all gas, but no.
Which is why I really like cards like, say, Mind Stone or Hedron Archive, because even like once they've fulfilled their purpose, you can recycle them into something else. So
I came to building a lot of these decks too, like this, to really tie this into how important this is with our mulligan, with the Sorenson mulligan, is as I'm sure people that have watched previous Canadian Highlander year-end championships.
Sure.
I have lost to so many Wheel of Fortunes in my life, my own Wheel of Fortunes. I'm sure everybody at this table feels this pain.
I only win with draw 7s.
Be it from bricking on draw 7s in combo, like really low curve combo or aggressive decks, or like when you're playing High Tide and you time spiral,
or
and
Mind's Desire,
or Mind's Desire, and you hit like 4 land counter, and you're like, oh. So like that's such a feel bad that it's just like, all right, well, I need
you're
to...
like 90% to win, but 10% of the time you just get got.
Yeah. So that for draw 7s like that, when you get past 3 lands in those draw 7s, you're basically costing yourself the game. You have played a card that could very well put your opponent in a better position than you are at the cost of your own card, your own mana, your own turn.
Yep.
And that's never something I want to do. And when you look at mulliganing for aggressive decks or combo decks, and you have these hands, like you only really need to operate off of 2 or 3 lands. And so the amount of time, and this is a cross-format thing, when people keep these like 5-land hand, 4-land hands for these aggressive decks or combo shells, be it draft, be it standard, modern, or whatever, and they're like, well, as long as I don't draw another land, I should be fine. But what if you do? If you draw another land, the game's like over.
And you just have to play averages. On average, in your next 3 draw steps, you are going to draw a land. Like, that's just
that cuts both
how the
ways,
math
right?
works.
Yeah.
So that's advice for deck building. Where does the mulligan tie into this?
Well, I think that's mulligan as well, is that if so, like, you build your deck to take advantage of the mulligan is the way that I see this, to give a general kind of stamp on it.
Yeah, so I think what Ben's saying is that he's building his deck to take advantage of the mulligan, and many other people are not. So that gives him an inherent advantage in the game, because they're just building their deck with a reasonable number of lands, like a higher curve. And so if the game progresses according to their game plan and Ben doesn't have a nut draw, they're going to be fine. They're going to play Magic. But it's not like they just win. But if Ben's deck does what it wants to do and is really explosive and puts them under a lot of pressure early, because he's way more threat dense than they are, because he's putting fewer lands in his deck, building it more redundantly, more cantrips, fewer lands. Over the course of the long game, Ben's decks just draw better.
How goozled are you by early Wasteland?
I mean, it'll hit you, but you also... I mean, if they have it, they have it, right? And you're not exactly out, because if these are such heavy cantrip decks, you get to use your cantrips just change into Lay of the Lands. They become like these modal spells, basically, right? Where if you have a sufficient lands, you're just like, well, I'm going to try to find gas. If I don't find gas, I'm putting this away. It's like old, like, pondering in Legacy for like tests and stuff. It's like, if your ponder's not winning you the game, ship it. Yeah. Usually. If so, like pre-Wasteland, your ponder's trying to kill your opponent or trying to set up so they can't kill you, but mostly trying to kill your opponent. And if Wasteland happens, then you just shift gears, and it's not as if you're including either extra lands or other cards to take precautions against getting Wastelanded. You just have to switch modes. It's like a tempo deck going from Wild Mongrel to holding up Circular Logics.
I mean, because they missed their land drop as well.
Yeah, like it's still symmetrical. Like they're not putting pressure on you. They're just spending their turn to one for one.
Okay, but what about Swamp, Dark Ritual, Sinkhole, Encroach?
Thanks. I hate it.
Anyway.
Well, okay.
Meanwhile, in real life,
and there are definitely ways to fight these decks, but I don't think people have
it hasn't adjusted. Yeah,
adapted, and I also don't think as many people have realized exactly what's been happening.
It's mostly being just memed into oblivion, and people
like, what do you mean?
Oh, I just mean like the Luxac comment. It's like it comes up a lot, and it's just like, yeah, ha ha ha, and it's
Ben's so lucky, really consistently lucky.
Well, I don't.
Like the two winningest players in the past 6 months are Ben and Nathan Hogman, who Ben helped, like, both of you work on decks together.
Yeah.
Both of you test a lot together.
I have a question.
Have been playing the same.
Yeah.
same style of deck.
Do you think Highlander players should be mulliganing more, or do you think Highlander players should be changing the way? And maybe this is two different questions. Should be changing the way they actually brew to take advantage of the mulligan?
Both. Absolutely both.
And it's not remotely close.
And I don't think that this conversation should disqualify decks like Jeskai Control, like
Not
whatever. Like that, they are a part of this conversation as well, as long as they recognize that that's not their role as a deck. That's not their role as an archetype. They are not going to be the people that can go under 30 lands. But they can accommodate for this. They can change their removal suite to their removal or disruption suite to be based off of the increased speed or consistency of the rest of the format. Play less, like, again, wishy-washy cards, play more haymakers, play more screds, just things that will deal with whatever pops out, even if it's on turn 3.
Interesting.
This podcast brought to you by Scred,
Yeah.
the breakfast of champions.
Sure.
Yeah, and it just means those types of decks aren't going to have as much time to spin the reels. So they like cards like Fact or Fiction become cuttable, as opposed to people thinking that card is just like untouchable. You can't cut Fact or Fiction in a blue control deck. I think it's
4 mana.
medium. Like I've been playing Hieroglyphic Illumination in those decks over it recently, and I think it's much better.
Really?
Yeah, just because Ben and I were talking earlier, it's a moto card. You can in the fast matchups you can cycle it for 1. Later on in blue matchups, or if you top deck it late game, you still get card advantage.
Do you want to just tell me what that card is real quick?
Sure, it's 3 and a blue for an instant. Draw 2 cards, and you can cycle it for a single blue mana.
And just early game, it gets out of your hand, and late game,
Yeah,
you prefer that better. There's a lot of really good 4 mana draw spells,
even
and this is your preferred one right now.
Yeah, just because of the fact that if you're against a fast deck and they have an explosive start, if you're looking at Fact or Fiction, it's just uncastable. They're going to end the game before you're in a position to take advantage of the cards you're getting from Fact or Fiction, if any of those cards are even impactful. And so just being able to interact earlier on against combo decks, against aggressive decks, against the fast mana decks is of the utmost importance, at least in our meta right now.
Are there any archetypes that you think used to be good that have actually been pushed out of the meta because of the mulligan? Like, is this hurting our meta game?
I actually think mid-range is in a rough spot right now, but like mid-range decks that aren't utilizing the fast mana.
I think they're on a bit of this dip, and they're starting to get better.
Mid-range is back.
Well, I mean, it's just the idea of what a mid-range deck is in the format has changed.
Yeah.
You're either the medium decks where you're just really trying to push through in the first couple of turns, but also have some late game punch, or you are decks looking to utilize Demonic Tutor, Strip Mine, Natural Order, that kind of stuff, like the lands variants, be it 4-color, 5-color, Abzan, whatever it may be. And those decks also very strongly benefit from aggressive mulliganing, because the decks where you have a dork into Strip Mine with a threat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I just think the decks, if your deck doesn't have like a nut draw, as Ben was saying earlier, I found those decks really hard to play over the past couple months, just because every deck you're playing against has.
You mean like a deck that does not have a potential nut draw within its number?
The past 2 tournaments, I played Abzan midrange, and I had 2 Moxes in my deck. But I don't even think a Mox qualifies a nut draw anymore, unless you're really building your deck to take advantage of it. Like a Mox draw in a more aggressive deck would probably qualify, but like I'm playing a 6 drop, 2 5 drops, and a bunch of 4 drops. So my deck just isn't capable of taking advantage as much. But
like nut draws for some of these decks, they don't fit your stereotypical opinion of what you think. Like it's not like Ancient Tomb, Black Lotus, Lotus Petal Salvagers kind of stuff. Although that
feels good.
Too.
Yeah.
But it can be something like Tapland, Ponder Thoughtseize, Ashiok.
yeah.
Like there are so many decks in the format where if you have that, and they're just like, well, this Ashiok's going to stay around forever.
Forever.
Get a
It's
million
always going to
things.
get a turn 2 Ashiok. You're just like, ooh.
And like Nut Draw is a little aggressive for that specific play, but your deck has to at least offer a sequence of plays that require your opponent to have such a very specific response.
Set of answers.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was gonna say actually that the closest things that I felt like were nut draws in my Abzan deck was when I either had a Mana Dork or a Mox into an early Armageddon.
Yeah.
That was the only.
You're like, I got turn 3 Geddons, let's go.
Yeah, that's where I won most of my games. Honestly, it was when I was just like, yep, I'm gonna play any 2-drop, doesn't matter what it is, and then I'm gonna Armageddon. Or 3-drop if it's accelerated into.
All right, let's really quickly talk about the London Mulligan. So, as some Magic players may know, at Magic Fest London, they are introducing, or they've already introduced, a new Mulligan.
It's Mythic Championship. Right?
Pardon me, the Mythic Championship. I'm sorry, they're introducing a new Mulligan, and depending on how this goes, it might be the new Mulligan going forward.
So how much truth is there in the rumor that they waited on the announcement until it got to London so they wouldn't have to call it the Cleveland Mulligan?
I don't know. Anyways.
I think it's more that they wanted to test it in Modern as opposed to Standard.
Yeah. So, Jared, for those who may not be familiar, what is a London Mulligan? How does it work?
So the London Mulligan is, in terms of power level, I'd say it's like a bridge between the Sorenson Mulligan and the current Mulligan system. You draw your 7 cards like normal. If you keep that, great, play Magic. If you choose to Mulligan, you draw 7 cards again. If you decide to keep, you put 1 card on the bottom of your library.
You get to keep 6 of the 7.
Then you carry on and play Magic. If you decide to Mulligan a second time, you draw 7 cards. If you decide to keep, you put 2 cards on the bottom of your library. Then you carry on and play Magic.
Yeah, and then all the way, so on and so forth.
No more Scry.
And that was going to follow up. And do you get to Scry as well? The answer to that is no.
Dear God.
So that would replace the current Mulligan, which is the Vancouver. And it's interesting.
So this is another Mulligan. It's a step up from the Vancouver Mulligan in terms of reducing variance.
Because you get to see the card that would be scryed first.
And in terms of like potential abusability especially in more eternal formats.
So the Mothership has now proposed an alternate Mulligan. So I guess the question to ask the table now is, do we think the Sorenson Mulligan is good for the format? Is it something we should keep doing? Has it outlived its purpose? Should we adopt the London Mulligan? I mean, this is a big question, and definitely take a second to go in the tank.
I'll need some citation here, but excuse me. This sounds a lot like the rejection Mulligan that European lander formats were using. Is it? I don't know how similar it is.
It's that one you got to like put cards back, shuffle them in, or set them aside, draw, then shuffle.
You'd keep 7 or something like that. Yeah, it was. So the rejection one, you had 7. I want to keep 5. You'd only take 2 back. You get to keep the cards from your hand. This one you have to shuffle the whole 7 away and then draw new ones.
Yeah, you don't just get to like
cherry pick.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
I mean, sort of,
yeah.
but in a way that's more useful.
So Ben, noted Mulligan breaker. Have you already started thinking of ways that you could abuse the London Mulligan, and is it as powerful as the Sorenson?
I haven't really touched the London Mulligan too much. I haven't gotten for something like that. I think you need to put in so much time practicing it and get in a whole bunch of reps before you can really give a solid opinion on that, which is boring. But that's just that's always my approach.
Just look at the history of this. It took us more than 12 years to really get to the point where we were where at least I was I think our Mulligan might be
kind of busted.
Yeah.
Well,
I put a lot of faith. This runs counter to most Magic players, but I put a lot of faith into Wizards of the Coast.
Sure.
And their ability as professionals to not destroy something that is so it's part of the game. It's how you play every game of Magic. There's always not always a Mulligan, but it's a part of starting your game. And I don't believe they would go forward with something like this or even test it out if they felt as though there was even like a slightest chance.
It would make the game worse.
Yeah.
But Ben, they keep printing bad cards. Why don't they only print good cards? I like good cards. Why do they print bad cards?
Hey, that's
I know
great.
how they can
Yeah,
fix
no,
this
that's
format.
fantastic,
I
man.
have the
No, I'm glad
solution
to
on
hear.
how they can
Hey,
fix the
can
format.
you do me a favor? There's a win.
Yeah. The sea is about a kilometer that way, Alex.
Hop on it.
Well, here's a question that I want to. I'm going to point to Jer. Jer, you've been playing a lot of Highlander on Magic Online,
Yes.
which does not include the Sorenson Mulligan.
No.
How does that change the format?
Not a whole lot, honestly. I've played what is now hundreds of games on and off my stream, and while the decks I play aren't really any of the style of decks that look to take advantage of our Mulligan rule, like the decks I'm playing are High Tide, Bant, Blink, Scape Shift, and Jeskai Control, and so I have added a land or two to some of those decks to counteract the fact that I was probably playing too few when I was playing with the Mulligan system. But other than that, like, most of the games are fine. Sometimes you mulligan to 5. I have been keeping track of my mulligans to less than 6, and I'm actually 4 wins, 2 losses on my mulls to 5 and 4.
What is your land count, incidentally, just for reference?
I'm playing 35 in High Tide, 37 in Scape Shift, 37 in Jeskai, and I can't remember Bant Blink, but
I've played nowhere near as much as Jer on Magic Online, but I have been playing on Magic Online, and of course the decks I'm playing, I played Garbage Plate on Magic Online. As someone curious to see as how, just to clarify, Plate is the 5-color with Channel Mirror. Platter is the 4-color with Omnitel.
There's 2 versions?
Yeah, there's 2 versions,
yeah.
which came about because of me playing for the normal mulligan. So I was playing Garbage Plate with Channel and Mirror online, and it was totally fine. It was totally fine with the mulligan. It was just like, oh, this is like a little less consistent than I'd want this pile to be. And because of that, I was like, well, is there a way I can make this more consistent without adding so many more lands or whatever it may be? And so I just shifted the deck to the platter version, which worked totally fine, felt great with our Vancouver mulligan, and then just feels busted with the Sorenson mulligan.
Sure.
Did I accidentally name that deck?
Yep.
yes.
Well done.
You're a part of the problem. Hey.
Yeah. All right. So we're going into sort of the wrap-up point of the episode right now. I have 2 humans at the table who have a long history with the council. Do you think the council going forward is going to contemplate changing the mulligan?
Yeah, I mean, we've been contemplating changing the mulligan for 4 years, so we're going to continue to contemplate it. But I will say, from my perspective, if the London Mulligan gets adopted, I will be pushing strongly to have us adopt that mulligan system as well. Having played a lot with the Vancouver Mulligan, I got asked a question on my stream if I could make one change to Highlander without everyone just accepts it. There's no backlash. There's no struggle to get it.
There's like 800 posts
through the charter
or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Reinstate the Battle of Wits rule, right?
Too soon.
I'm so angry.
It's okay.
I would actually just change to the Vancouver Mulligan right now and just say, going forward, we're just whatever Mulligan Magic uses.
Standardize this with the mothership.
Yeah, it like makes it much easier for people who try to get events at GPs, for example, to be like, yep, we have our points list. That's all you need to worry about. There's no like wonky mulligan rule. There's no points per X rule. There's no
Brothers Yamazaki.
Yeah, there's no Brothers Yamazaki house rule.
Ben, would you be happy if we threw away your years of research?
Well, if my years of collecting data on this format lead to consolidating our format and pushing for legitimacy, then yeah, I'm more than happy. Like I've also been on the push to get rid of the Sorenson mulligan.
I was going to say, you're also talking to the 2 council members who are like the most on board.
Serge,
Yeah.
that's how science works.
Yeah, if all my research has led to, well, I'm a monster. That's totally fine. Great, we got something.
We figured that out in like the
It's like,
first.
well,
yeah,
I
that
figured
was
out this
easy.
mulligan was busted. Better burn all my notes.
Yeah. Well, I'm done here. But yeah, it's like, I think it's just, if we can find a graceful way of getting rid of the Sorenson mulligan and joining with something that will help decrease variance across Magic, that's the intention.
Have more fun games.
Yeah, you get to keep the whole, oh, thank God I get to put this Fatal Push away because I'm against High Tide. But
you actually get to do it more.
Yeah, but you don't get the ridiculous, hey, how's it going? I'm Wheeler. Anyways, Black Lotus, Dark Ritual, Cabal, like, you don't get that kind of...
I actually think the Vancouver Mulligan leads to more interesting games of Magic and less abusable from a deck building side.
I don't feel so good, Mr. Wheeler.
Because like, assuming you're willing to mulligan to 5, you see 11 more cards with our mulligan than you do currently. You would see 9 more cards than... as opposed to the London
I
Mulligan.
also suppose it could be argued that you're making more choices during the mulligan.
With the London Mulligan?
Yeah.
Because you have to choose to put cards back. Yeah, but I mean, you're potentially making more choices in our format just because you have to choose whether or not to mulligan additional times.
I haven't thought about this as much, so if I come off looking like an idiot, great. But
Looking like.
I don't know, when it comes to the decision for mulligans for our format, a lot of the time, at least for me personally, and not to really speak for Nathan Hogman, counselor, he also has a very much like a, yeah, this is going. Like, it's just, you look at it, you feel if that can, like, I look at my hands, I asked, is this going to win me the game? If it isn't, it's gone. And I think with again, as someone with 0 reps of the London Mulligan, at least from my position now, it looks like it offers for more choice, which more choice while lowering degeneracy sounds pretty cool and good to me.
It sounds like it raises skill to me.
Yeah, I'll take any of that.
And that was one of the things when we went down to our first Snohomish tournament at Geek Fortress years ago now. That's one of the things that the owner and the commentators both mentioned to me, is that they had me and you on camera most of the day because we were winning and we're, people want to see us jam.
All right. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Finish your point, yeah.
That's one of the things they said the most, is that when we were mulliganing, we just like drew our cards, then shuffled it back into our deck. And other people were like tanking and we're just like shuffling, draw another hand, mulligan immediately.
It's like, nope.
All right, in conclusion, any final things you'd like to say about mulligans? Anything you didn't get a chance to say throughout the episode that you're just like, I wish I could have...
This episode, especially considering who's involved with it, could come off as being like the format's all about mulligans. That's still just not true.
No,
like,
not at all.
You can mulligan well and then just still punt your sequencing or play like a turkey sandwich on rye and just not...
Feeling very attacked here.
It's an important thing to consider when you're building your deck and when you are, surprise, mulliganing. But don't let it define every single aspect of your games and of your deck construction.
No, it's just a factor. It's an important factor, but it's
one
not
among many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to our closing segment today. Powerful Magic. And today we're going to talk about a story that is all skill and no luck.
Is it?
No luck at all.
Did the best wizard win?
Always wins.
So in the first episode of the Canadian Highlander League, I got to play the mirror match against my good buddy Alex here. We were both on Workshop Weenie, some type of BattleBot variants and all that kind of fun stuff. And we were...
Some people who are very pedantic about what each of those names means.
Yeah, I will use both interchangeably. traditionally BattleBots is slightly larger, but meh, whatever. It's a workshop deck that like fires out artifacts as quickly as possible.
All right.
And I'll use both terms interchangeably. It doesn't matter. So Alex and I, game one, are on a fairly even board state. Everything's going great. And then Alex rolls the dice and does a draw 7. And I think
Was this the game where we both had?
that was game 2.
Fortune.
That was game 2.
Oh, okay,
You
we'll
both
get
had
to
Wheel
that.
of Fortune.
Yeah, but anyways, game 1, we roll it. I look at card 1, I start grinning. Card 2, I basically start crying. I'm so happy. I was like, it was, my first draw was Tolarian Academy, and then it was Mana Crypt. And I was like, okay,
Above average.
it doesn't matter what I draw at this point. My hand is so explosive. And then it was just all gas. It was just like swords and equipment and haste creatures. And it was just like, Alex paid 3 mana to be like, Serge wins. So I untapped, I cast everything, and I killed Alex.
Powerful magic.
How you doing there, my dude?
Well, I'm just fine.
But that wasn't enough. No. We set up game 2. And Alex and I are both kind of looking at each other. And there's these interesting tells in Highlander, probably in all Magic. One of the tells, my favorite, is when their opponent looks in their graveyard, and you're like, nice Snapcaster. You know, one of those things. And one of my other favorite tells is how many cards in your hand. Now, my first instinct when somebody asks you how many cards is they drew Mind Twist. Like, that's a classic one. You're like, okay, how many cards? Mind Twist, sure. But Alex and I are sitting across from each other, and he says how many cards. In my head, I'm like, you drew Wheel of Fortune. And he's like,
I feel like I blushed scarlet. It's like, and I was like, no,
And then you flashed it to the camera.
yes,
yeah.
Baka.
Yeah. And I'm like,
Wheel of Sundere.
yeah. And I'm like, that's so interesting, because I also have a Wheel of Fortune in my hand. And so we're playing this mental game of dueling Wheel of Fortune, like who's gonna wheel first, and Alex is like, fine, and he just slams his, and once again just draws me into the perfect. It doesn't even matter what the 7 cards were, just hands me a winning hand. I think that one was off the back of cranial plating.
If you need someone to talk to, give me a call. I know what it's like.
Yeah. So I think this just brings up one of my favorite wheelerisms. Sometimes you live by the draw 7, sometimes you draw by the draw 7. But at the end of the day, it's all a game of skill. No luck involved.
Sometimes you always live by that draw 7.
Like, this
and
is-
you will most assuredly die by that draw 7.
This is also definitely a great situation to invoke the quote of our friend, I think it was Spencer Sackland. Game of skill, no luck involved. May the best wizard win.
Yeah.
Best wizard always
wizard.
wins.
Best wizard always wins.
Always
All
wins.
skill, no luck. Best wizard always wins. Also, good Nux tattoos. And the toes.
How many letters on your
Toes too. Toes are included for this one.
Okay, no, my joke for that one is
Bolt,
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 bolt, and then take your shoes off and you have bolt, bolt on your note. All right, everybody. That's
Bolt price.
yeah. That's going to be our episode for today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions, especially if you have opinions on the Mulligans, let us know down below, because there's change
there's a
on the
lot.
horizon. Winter's coming. That's
We always
it.
read the comments, so
It's spring.
I don't know. I haven't watched Game of Thrones, but I hear that's a phrase of some
Game of
significance.
Thrones.
Anyways, thank you very much. A reminder that North 100 is brought to you with your support over the Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. We will see you next episode. Thank you so much, and until next time.